The Apollo 13 mission is one of the most famous missions in the history of space exploration, primarily due to the life-threatening crisis it encountered and the remarkable rescue effort that followed. In this video, we will explore the step-by-step process of the Apollo 13 mission and its subsequent rescue, highlighting the challenges faced and the heroic efforts of NASA and its astronauts. The Apollo 13 mission, launched on April 11, 1970, was the seventh crewed mission in NASA's Apollo program. It was intended to be the third mission to land on the Moon, following the successful Apollo 11 and Apollo 12 missions. The crew consisted of 3 astronauts: Commander James A. Lovell Jr., Command Module Pilot John L. Swigert Jr., and Lunar Module Pilot Fred W. Haise Jr. Launch and translunar injection. The mission began with a successful launch from Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The Saturn V rocket propelled the Apollo 13 spacecraft towards Earth's moon. About 55 hours into the mission, the spacecraft performed translunar injection (TLI), a critical burn that sent it on a trajectory towards the moon. Oxygen tank explosion. Approximately 56 hours into the mission, while the astronauts were performing routine procedures and systems checks, a catastrophic event occurred. One of the 2 oxygen tanks in the service module, SM, exploded. This explosion caused a loss of electrical power and the spacecraft's primary source of drinking water. Abort lunar landing. The explosion had severe implications for the mission. With the service module crippled and the command module, CM, losing its capability to support the lunar landing, the decision was made to abort the planned lunar landing. Instead, the mission's new objective became a safe return to Earth. Immediate challenges. In the immediate aftermath of the explosion, the situation inside the spacecraft was tense. The command module was running on limited battery power, and the lunar module, LM, was used as a lifeboat. The LM had limited consumables, including oxygen and power, which were originally meant for 2 astronauts for 2 days, but now had to support 3 astronauts for 4 days. Assessing the damage. NASA's Mission Control in Houston, Texas, immediately began assessing the damage and formulating a plan for the safe return of the Apollo 13 crew. Engineers and flight controllers worked around the clock to understand the extent of the damage and the impact on various systems. Lunar module is a lifeboat. The lunar module, which was originally designed for lunar descent and ascent, was now the astronauts' only hope for survival. It had to be adapted to serve as a lifeboat. Engineers and astronauts worked together to conserve power, water, and oxygen within the LM. Navigation challenges. Navigating the spacecraft without the guidance and propulsion of the service module presented a significant challenge. The crew and ground control had to rely on the lunar module's descent engine for propulsion and make precise course corrections to ensure a safe trajectory back to Earth. Oxygen management. Managing the limited oxygen supply was crucial. The LM had enough oxygen for 3 people for about 2 days. But the journey back to Earth would take 4 days. To extend the LM's life support, the crew had to ration their oxygen consumption, reduce metabolic rates, and even adapt makeshift carbon dioxide scrubbers using available materials. Carbon dioxide scrubbers. Another pressing issue was the rising levels of carbon dioxide in the spacecraft. The command module's scrubbers, designed to remove CO2, were incompatible with the lunar module. The crew and ground control devised a solution using materials available on board: square cartridge filters from the command module, duct tape, and plastic bags. This makeshift contraption allowed them to survive. Temperature control. Temperature control was another challenge. The LM's systems generated heat, and without the service module's radiators, the spacecraft could overheat. The crew had to carefully balance temperature control, shutting down non-essential systems to conserve power while preventing the spacecraft from getting too cold. The importance of temperature control. In the vacuum of space, temperature can be an extreme and deadly adversary. The Apollo spacecraft had to deal with both scorching heat when facing the sun and frigid cold when in the shadow of the Earth or Moon. Controlling temperature was vital to ensure the survival of the crew and the proper functioning of onboard equipment. The lunar module is a lifesaver. Following the explosion, the command module, which had the primary life support systems, was rendered inoperative. The lunar module, designed for moon landings, became the crew's only sanctuary. It housed the essential equipment needed for life support, including temperature control systems, radiators and thermal insulation. To regulate temperature, the lunar module relied on a combination of radiators and thermal insulation. Radiators were used to dissipate excess heat generated by the spacecraft's systems. These radiators were made up of a network of tubes carrying water coolant, which absorbed and released heat. Thermal insulation materials such as aluminized mylar were crucial in preventing heat loss to space when the spacecraft was in the shadow of celestial bodies. The crew also had to use spare thermal blankets to augment the module's existing insulation. Power management. The lunar module had limited power reserves, and the crew had to carefully manage its use. They powered down non-essential systems to conserve energy. This included shutting off lights, guidance computers, and communication equipment when they were not required. Crew's role in temperature control. The Apollo 13 crew played an active role in temperature regulation. They had to adjust the spacecraft's orientation to ensure that the lunar module's radiators faced away from the sun to prevent overheating. When in the shadow of the moon or Earth, they had to turn the radiators toward the cold environment to maintain a stable temperature. Communication challenges. The explosion had also damaged the spacecraft's communication systems. The high-gain antenna on the command module was no longer functional, making communication with mission control difficult. The crew had to rely on the LM's low-gain antenna and improvised fixes to maintain contact. Solving the communication problem. Using the lunar module as a lifeboat. The lunar module was originally designed for lunar descent and ascent but was repurposed as a lifeboat to provide life support, power, and a means of propulsion. The LM had its own communication system, which was incompatible with the CM. However, it became the crew's only option for survival. Improvising an adapter. The CM's square carbon dioxide removal canisters wouldn't fit the LM's round receptacles. The crew and mission control had to brainstorm and create an adapter using materials available on the spacecraft, including plastic bags, cardboard, and duct tape. Communication via relay. With limited power and a need to conserve it, communication was established through a relay. The LM would relay messages from the crew back to Earth via the CM. This allowed for vital communication while conserving the LM's power supply. Mission Control's role. Mission Control played a pivotal role in solving the communication problem. Engineers and flight controllers worked tirelessly to develop procedures, simulate scenarios, and communicate with the crew in real time. Their expertise and calm under pressure were crucial. Lunar flyby. The Apollo 13 spacecraft continued on its trajectory towards the moon. Instead of landing, it executed a close flyby of the moon, using the lunar gravity to assist in its return to Earth. This maneuver was crucial in conserving fuel and achieving a free return trajectory. Earth re-entry planning. As the spacecraft approached Earth, meticulous planning was required for the re-entry. The explosion had damaged the heat shield on the command module. Engineers had to ensure that the heat shield would still protect the astronauts during re-entry. The re-entry plan. Free return trajectory. Fortunately, the Apollo 13 spacecraft was on a free return trajectory when the explosion occurred. This meant that, without any propulsion, the spacecraft would naturally loop around the moon and return to Earth. This initial trajectory was crucial, as it provided a backup plan for the mission from the beginning. Course correction. Despite the free return trajectory, the explosion altered the spacecraft's path. NASA engineers devised a series of small course correction burns using the lunar module's descent engine. These precise maneuvers were executed to ensure the spacecraft would hit a narrow re-entry corridor in Earth's atmosphere. Timing is everything. Timing was of the essence. Re-entering Earth's atmosphere too steeply or too shallow could result in catastrophic failure. NASA had to calculate the exact moment for the engine burn that would set the spacecraft on its path for re-entry. They used ground-based tracking stations and onboard navigation instruments to monitor the spacecraft's progress and refine these calculations. Limited resources. Apollo 13's command module had limited power and consumables, making it necessary to power down non-essential systems and conserve resources for the critical re-entry phase. The crew endured cold temperatures and had to ration their consumables carefully. Tense moments. As Apollo 13 approached Earth, tension reached its peak. Mission control and the astronauts themselves were acutely aware that any miscalculation could lead to disaster. The world watched anxiously as the spacecraft re-entered Earth's atmosphere. Critical course corrections. Throughout the journey, the crew had to make critical course corrections, relying on the LM's descent engine. These maneuvers were essential to ensure the spacecraft would enter Earth's atmosphere at the right angle and speed for a safe re-entry. Re-entry and recovery. On April 17, 1970, after 6 days in space, the Apollo 13 spacecraft re-entered Earth's atmosphere. The heat shield performed as expected, and the command module splashed down safely in the Pacific Ocean. The crew was rescued by the USS Iwo Jima. The Apollo 13 mission is a testament to human ingenuity, teamwork, and determination in the face of adversity. Despite a catastrophic explosion that threatened the lives of the astronauts, NASA, along with the crew, worked tirelessly to overcome immense challenges and bring the astronauts safely back to Earth. It stands as a shining example of the resilience of the human spirit in the pursuit of exploration and discovery.